Well, welcome to another episode Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Victoria.
Hi.
Victoria, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm 20. I'm Scottish, as you can probably hear from the accent.
It's a beautiful
I'm
accent.
at
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm at university. I'm just going into third year, and I study history. And I have a whole history blog type Instagram page that I do in my spare time.
Well, what part
Pretty
about
much.
history are we talking about? Because I can tell you all about the history of cornflakes, but I feel like you're interested in something a little bit better than that.
I'm still doing it just generally just now. I haven't specialised yet, but I'm looking into either medieval Britain or Tudor Britain, possibly. Yeah.
Why medieval?
Because the castles, the battles, all the royals, I just love that stuff.
Honestly, looking from I wanted to be an architect when I was young. I think it was because Minecraft, I just started playing it and I was like, this is easy. I know all about structures. I could tell you what era it came from, if it's Anglo-Saxon, whatever it is. But then you really start kind of appreciating a lot of things. Like when I was a kid, I never cared a single thing about any of the old buildings. I was like, why don't they build something new, like a Verizon or something that has 5G? And then now I'm looking around and I see all these old buildings with moss on them that are being taken down. I'm like, but the history behind it, even if it's not old and it's just built to look like that, it looks appealing. Like a small grotto in another country to me is amazing compared to when I walk out my front door and I see all these houses that look exactly the same and nothing else different besides maybe some dude puts a flamingo as his mailbox. And I'm like, that's interesting.
Yeah. Obviously Scotland's got a lot of castles and stuff like that. So when I was little, my parents always used to take me on trips to all those places. So ever since I was a kid, I've really had a real interest in history, basically, and heritage, and always loved visiting castles. And even Dundee, where I live, we have quite a lot of history here, but Edinburgh is full of history, it's brimming with history. And my mum's from there, so I've always gone there. And you walk into there and it's just basically, it's a fairy tale of history there, because the buildings and the architecture are so original, and I've always appreciated that ever since I was little. And then through school I realized I was actually good at it as a subject, so I just never really gave it up.
What would you say is the most fascinating thing you've learned so far about history?
Oh, that's hard. I've got a real interest in Mary Queen of Scots. Definitely, she is definitely my favourite historical figure. Just because obviously I can see a lot of the places where she kind of was in her time in Scotland. So
who is she, by the way? I'm not too familiar.
Right, okay, so Mary Queen of Scots was the Queen of Scotland in the 16th century, and she ended up being beheaded because of the English Queen Elizabeth Tudor. So she's kind of a good icon of Scottish history. A lot of the religious turmoil of this country is kind of based around her. So yeah, I just love her as a figure. She's so controversial, and there's a lot we don't know about her. So I just love finding out stuff about her and getting to retrace her steps, basically.
I'm trying to think. Is there any possible way that, understanding from her point of view where she was beheaded, did they flub up any details? And it kind of because I learned a lot about the Salem witch trials from a past guest. Her name's Lainey. She was teaching me how a lot of the stuff was just calling, if a neighbor did something you didn't like, you'd just call and be like, hey, bam, they're a witch. And then those people would get burned. I'm like, did that happen with the Queen?
Yeah, she wasn't the most liked figure because she was Catholic and Scotland turned Protestant during the time of her reign, so she wasn't very welcomed by a lot of her own citizens. So there's a lot of debate as to whether the plots that she was accused of being a part of were actually just basically her being framed. And there's these letters called the casket letters, and it's debated whether she actually wrote them or whether they were forged, because they ultimately led basically to her death. They read of a love story about her and Lord Bothwell, who was her third husband, who she married just months after her other husband was murdered, probably by Lord Bothwell. So we don't know whether she wrote them and they were actually evidence to her crimes, or whether they were just forged and she was framed for it. I like to believe she was framed because that's more interesting. So
this is something you would see as a Netflix show. Like the way you were explaining that was like, it could have been this thing, it could have been trickery. And I'm like, that seems like a lot throughout history. Like so many people talk about it's this, and then you end up finding it's something different. I'm like, I would love to just have the power to go back in time and just observe. Like my
Yeah.
like most famous or whatever, my giant thing that I like to dive down to when it comes down to history is anything to do with the Renaissance period. I'm fascinated with it, even though I barely know anything about it, mostly on the concept of I have one figure I look up to in that, and that's Leonardo da Vinci. I just want to be sitting there like, how the fuck are you thinking of these flying machines? Like, what? People here are still like, they're not even wiping after they go to the bathroom, and you're over here building a machine that can fly, and then a tank that has guns on every single part so it can't be snuck up on. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I would do anything to be able to travel back in time and look at stuff like that. That would be so cool to go and actually see, and see things that we don't actually have on record about them, because there's so much we don't know, and you'd be able to like clarify it for yourself. You could go back in time. I'd love that.
How hard is it for you, or depending on, I guess it's going to be a little bit different just because where you're at, like from the States, a lot of people don't bring up history a lot of the time. It's more like, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about, what type of Starbucks Frappuccino I would like to have today. But how like often are you able to get into a conversation about history without seeming like you're boring somebody, or you're trying to, because history for some reason, it's a fascinating thing, but a lot of people don't really want to look into it that much. I think it's just because the education system teaches it in the worst way possible. Like, I learned about Greek mythology, which is my rabbit hole to go down. If anybody wants to attack me on Greek mythology, I will question, and I will light you up any day of the week. But we only took like maybe one class that was a day long throughout that whole entire thing. It was just the subject we talked about in that class. Oh, we're doing a Greek mythology day. I'm like, hang on a second. Can we focus on this a little bit more? I would like to know more about the gods and all these types of things. And they brought up this really fascinating one, which the only time I really ever got into a big history conversation besides some person talking about the pyramids were built by aliens. And I'm like, that's fucking not proven. I don't know where you want me to
Yeah,
go with
yeah.
that. But I was working at a hotel, and there was this guy there that gave me some of the best advice in my life. Oh my God. But were just talking, and we somehow got on the subject of evil torture devices back in the day. Like, I guess it led from like the death penalty. We were talking about that, and then we just started going into torture devices. And he goes, "Yeah, they used to do this thing where they used to lower you on a metal pyramid, and it would go in your butt and then split." And I was like, "Holy crap!" I was like, "That's worse than the Iron Bull." And I learned from that Greek mythology little subject we talked about the Iron Bull. When I did my own research, was they had this bull that was made of iron, and they would throw somebody into it and then light coals under it, and it would just heat up the whole thing. And they even put two holes in the nose for the smoke to come out, and you would hear the person, like the nose would whistle, and it would be the person screaming. And I'm like, that is clever and sick as hell.
Yeah, I didn't actually know that. There you go. You're teaching me. See, there's too much in history. You can't ever know everything. Yeah, the education system. There's definitely a lot of let's call it historical amnesia, in that kind of countries forget about the history that they don't want to admit they're accountable for. I would say my education was pretty good here. Like, I'll be honest, I covered a wide variety of topics, and everything from like British history to like American history and like all that's in between. But they definitely should be. I mean, I want to go into teaching or lecturing eventually. That's what I really want to go into. So I really hope that I can stand in front of a class and actually engage them in a topic, because you do see a lot of people turn off. As soon as you say you do history, people just look at you and are like, you must be so dull. Like, thank you for that. I'd like to think not. But yeah, you have to engage people, definitely. Like, it's not all remembering dates and monarchs and family trees and stuff. It is stuff that relates like to daily life now. And I think that's the most important thing about history, is that the past really defines the world as it is just now. And it's better to put the modern issues in context with. So that's why my political history is such a good idea, is because it takes modern politics and puts them in their origins and where they came from. So I think it's important that the education system actually tackles difficult topics to kind of cover, as well as just trying to get kids to remember dates, because that's not going to engage them at all.
Yeah, you have to get them from glazing over in class. Like, I don't know what this person's talking about. I don't really care anymore. And they're looking out the window. My history teacher, I think I had probably 3 or 4 teachers my entire school education that really honestly had me care and kind of really get into something I was learning about. And 3 of them were history teachers. It's where I found a lot of my fascination with history. But I remember one of them, his name was Mr. Bevilacqua. And dude, you want to talk about someone that looks like Brad Pitt? That dude, damn. Um, I'm just saying, you gotta compliment, even if a dude looks good. You gotta be like, all right, that's a good looking guy. But he, on the first day of class, they give you the rooms to go to. And it was like B80 or something was our room. So I go up to B80, nobody's in there. There's just a bunch of other kids standing around like, where's the teacher? And I'm like, well, are we in the wrong spot? And they're like, no, his class isn't here. It moved. And then it was like, well, where did it move to? And then the history teacher that was beside him, they would put them all in these halls, would be like, I guess they were friends, and he knew what was going on. So he said, it's actually going to be in E45. And then we would go all the way down to E45 on like the other side of the building where all the mechanic stuff is. And then the guys would tell us down there that he's in C something. So then we'd go to cooking, and then we would go literally spend like 15 minutes on this freaking scavenger hunt trying to find our teacher. At this point, I'm just like, I don't even care that much about this class to want to actually do this, but I'm also really upset that it's a goal and I want to complete it. It's like a level in a video game. I just want to find where our teacher is. I feel like he's gone missing. He's been kidnapped. Then after like 8 different rooms, we go into this one room and he's sitting there and he goes, welcome to my class. We're like, why was it so hard to find you? And he goes, what you guys just dived into is going to be our first subject of how Magellan felt when he was circumnavigating the globe. And we're like, fuck, like, no way. Like, it was that like thing that was so plotted out where you're like, that's how you get kids hooked into something.
Yeah, I love that. That is such a good way of introducing like kids to history. That is a much better way than just standing, writing on a chalkboard out a bunch of dates and be like, remember this, remember this. It's definitely more important to engage them like that. I would totally agree. I love that. I aspire to be that kind of teacher one day.
I think it's the idea of, we spend a lot of time, and I consider this like a fix if people would just understand perspectives of other people. Understand the perspective, which that did for me, of what Magellan was going through. If you would have been just a normal day, I would have came up to the room, the very first one, sat down, and you would have started talking about Magellan and be like, this idiot thought he was going to discover whatever. But then I was confused, and then he put me through all that confusion, and then I sit down, he starts explaining, and I'm like, I know what that's like. I have been severely confused. It's like when you're driving your car and they're like, just ask for directions. Well, I don't want to ask for directions. I can get to where we are going. And then it's this long, like 2 hours long, where then eventually you ask for directions. It's that type of thing. I think history is important because when it's something we've experienced, it's something we need to know. But the best way to teach it is to understand the perspective of what was going on at the time period. What are all the effects that were happening? Well, they thought this way because this was going on with the queen. A lot of people felt this way towards her, and this is why this led to this action. Instead of just being like, why would they do that? They're idiots. It's like, understand the education of the time period.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think people often struggle to understand the context of which these people all lived in, because we have access to Google and social media and technology where we can find out everything in an instant, whereas they didn't have that then. So they honestly based all their knowledge off what they would learn in very limited education systems and through stuff that had to be written down and passed through messengers, which took days to accomplish. Whereas now we get the instant results, but they didn't have that. So it's important to remember when you're looking at people that it's often see them as quite, I think people often see them as quite dumb compared to in like modern society, but we have so many advantages compared to them that it's important to put yourself in their shoes and think about the lack of resources that they had if you actually want to understand why they made the decisions that they did.
Look at I mean, I would still probably have the same ideas when it came to building something, because honestly, if you offered me $1 million, first thing I'm building a castle like Dracula. That to me is like my idea of a perfect home, is something where you really get to see the architecture of stuff too. And, being a photographer, I've seen on your profile and stuff was the fact of, that sounded really creepier. That sounded so creepy, me saying, wow. But
No, it's
so
fine.
the Instagram profile where she posts public pictures, not anything private, where I was watching a lot of, seeing all the pictures that you were taking. Dang, I'm really digging myself in a deep, creepy hole here. Hang on a second. With looking at the pictures on Instagram in public, where, okay, hold on. I'll fix this. Looking at your Instagram profile, seeing the pictures of all the castles and stuff that you were taking pictures of to kind of show and educate a little bit too, I was noticing that. I was noticing the craft and the culture. And honestly, the more kind of simple is better a little bit. It seems like we get too advanced where we lose a lot of things. And that's what happens with, like, if you look at China, for instance, they don't give two shits about their history. America doesn't really care a whole lot about their history. But other places like the UK, things like Scotland, Ireland, all these things, they really care about where they come from and where their roots are. Their coat of arms. I have a coat of arms. It is fucking badass looking. But nobody in my family cares, and it's in a basement in a little, like, whatever you want to call it, in a freaking cardboard box piled on top of other shit. Like, we have a Snoopy cell phone. It's a giant old landline with Snoopy holding it. Like, what the fuck? That's on top of the coat of arms. And I'm like, we have this amazing thing. I mean, we all love having flags. We all love showing flags off and all this stuff, but we don't ever want to show this thing that symbolizes our family, our crest, our symbol that people used to wear on their armor and used to walk into battle with.
Yeah, totally. I mean, as you say, obviously the difference between countries is unbelievable. And I think it's really sad that not everyone recognises their heritage. I mean, surely everyone's at least a little bit intrigued as to where your country came from, where you came from, what you descend from, basically. I think that's fascinating. I think here we definitely embrace it a lot more. I don't know whether it's just because it's more obvious to us in all the architecture and everything else, or what, but I think people take for granted the, like as you said, the flags and stuff, which all come from that past without actually recognising the origins of it, which doesn't really make a lot of sense when you think about it. Because surely you should acknowledge where everything came from, because then how do you know what defines you?
What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
That's a question that still, I don't think, is answered to this day.
I don't think it can be. I really don't.
Oh man, I want to go back in time to where dinosaurs were a thing. Just watch, observe.
Yeah. I think
Have
that'd
you
be scary though.
have you found anything through history that you were kind of taught wrong, maybe in school, they ended up finding later, or maybe something that was more interesting when you really dived into it on your own? Like, for example, Abraham Lincoln's death over here. He got shot by John Wilkes Booth in a theater in the back of the head. Well, he didn't die. They took him home, and then he died like 8 hours later in agonizing pain. But he had a bullet lodged in his back of his head into his eye. So he survived that and just lay dying. But he established the Secret Service and all these other types of things as that was going on. And I'm like, where was that in school? You had me thinking this dude shot him in the back of the head and jumped off a thing and broke his leg and then ran off into the night. I would want to know that our president survived a bullet to the head. That's going to make me think of him way more established in my mind than just him getting shot. And it's like, oh, another person got shot.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, university education is obviously so much more advanced and in-depth than school, just simply because you're older so you can handle it, and also you've made a choice to study in that exact field. So there is no way that school could cover as much as what I've done at university. Like, it's just impossible. I would definitely argue that university level history is much more interesting because you get to use sources better. And I always found school, it was very structured, where you were taught to write an essay or answer a question and you followed this one formula and did it all the way through. Whereas you go to university and you're told, no, that's wrong, you don't do that. You write it in like a way that's very expressive, and you use different sources and compile them and stuff. So it's definitely a lot better, like the further into study that you get. School, I was really happy with my school's history department. Like, they were my favourite teachers, and I loved the way that they taught. I think they could have covered actual Scottish history a lot better than they did, because I always hated, like, I don't know if you know about all the Jacobite stuff, the Jacobite Revolution and stuff. I hated that in school. It's very Scottish history. So
What is that? You said
it was
Jacobite,
this.
I'm thinking like a jackalope or whatever those little bunny things are with antlers.
No, it was basically the supporters of King James. It was just a fight over like the monarchy and who should be in power. That's all it was. But in school, it was made out to be really dull, and it was just remembering dates and people and things. Whereas I did it last year at uni, and I realised I actually love the topic so much, and there's so much more to it, and so many stories within it that it's far more interesting than I ever realised at school. But what I did love at school. We did the slave trade and stuff, so I knew like all about that, and I adored learning about that. I mean, it's horrific, like it's horrible to learn about, but it really, really makes you stop and think and consider a lot. And I would say we were really well taught that at school, personally.
I remember I did a paper, I think it was the Silk Road. Was it the Silk Road, or was it something to do with China or Japan, where there was like this drug or this plant that they were using that they were chewing
Yeah.
on, and it was like it became a giant addiction thing that was flooding through their armies, where the people would try and ban them from using this certain thing. But then I learned from that was that the Somalian pirates, the people that you see are like on whatever with that, what's that movie with Tom Hanks, Captain Phillips or whatever it is?
Oh yeah, yes, I know what you mean. Yeah,
Where they go, I am the captain now. It's like a giant meme. So those
yeah.
pirate guys actually used to be what they're called as the volunteer fire services of Somalia or something. But what happened was we came in there and were blowing up, like, using dynamite to catch fish and stuff, and totally wrecked their whole ecosystem with fish, where a lot of these people started going starving and they couldn't capture fish anymore. So they just started robbing boats and taking over boats and doing all these hostile things that turned them into what they are today. And then they kept eating this drug that's like cocaine or speed, that made them all really skinny and really freaking outrageously hyper and stuff. And I'm like, that's history I would like to know about. Like, you show me the one side. Well, what's the other side?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, again, I mean, that's much more engaging, isn't it? Learning that kind of thing. Because things that almost, I always think more repulsive things are always more intriguing to kids. Like, if you draw them in with these gory deaths and torture methods and whatever else, or things such as that with the pirates, I always feel like that's much preferable than learning about all these things that weren't quite as gruesome or interesting.
Do you lean towards more of the fact of the history, or do you lean more towards the mythos? Like, there's a lot of myth and folklore I like to dive down to. Like, I like to think about like the Loch Ness Monster a little bit, or, Bigfoot, all these types of things. I like to hear the story of it. Not that I believe in it, but just like, what's the perspective of what's going on here? Why do these people create this type of thing?
I think I prefer the fact side, I'll be honest. See, knowing that something definitively happened, I just find that so much more satisfying than the unknown. I do like to conspire about the blanks that we're missing and stuff. And I mean, Loch Ness Monster, obviously, is just like fascinating in itself. But I definitely prefer things that I can absolutely 100% say are true or are most likely to be true. I do struggle a bit with when there's not a definitive answer. I don't really like that. That annoys me a bit, to be honest. I like things to be neat and tidy, and that's not possible in history. So I definitely enjoy the stories of things, but I like there to be a line where stuff stops, because see the whole conspiracy theorists who insist that we didn't go to the moon and,
Oh
Stonehenge was
God,
like bought by aliens.
there was an episode I did recently where I talked about that. I think we've gone to the moon, but I'm saying the moon landing video, I just think we didn't get there when we say we got there. That's it. I'm just saying it makes a little bit of sense, but okay.
Okay, I will take that. I'll take that. But you get some really wacky ones, like really wacky ones that just there's evidence there, and then they still go, no, I don't believe that. I believe the evidence is made up, and that just no, that just infuriates me beyond belief, because
Hollow
where
Earth
where
is
does
my
that
favorite.
stop?
Hollow Earth is my favorite, that the Earth is hollow.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Well, when you're looking through, like, obviously focusing on the fact too, it's a little bit gruesome. Besides seeing learning about the queen that was beheaded, have you come across anything else that kind of really, I guess, strick you with more like curiosity?
I definitely love I like British history more than any other kind, I'll be honest, just because I like things that I can see basically and relate to. But I really like the Victorian Empire as well. I love like the Victorian era, Victorian Britain, all the empire stuff like that, like learning about colonization and stuff too. That's super interesting. And it wasn't that long ago either, obviously. I mean, you talk about medieval stuff and you can kind of say, oh, well, that was forever ago. But the Victorian era obviously wasn't. It's 19th century. So it's not too long ago. And yet a lot has changed in that time for the better, definitely. But a lot of the stuff which still remains in this country was built or created by the Victorians. So I love anything to do with that, because even though it was a morbid time for quite a lot of people, it's definitely very relevant to modern Britain.
See, now 19th century Victorian surgery is where I have a lot of knowledge. Surgery specifically, not anything else outside of that realm. But like big wigs, for
Okay.
instance, the giant white powdered wigs that they wear, that was because of syphilis and stuff. And there was a giant push of amazing innovation in the medical industry when it comes to Robert Liston and Joseph Lister, these guys that were revolutionary in their field, plague doctors, all these. It's crazy to see how that literally was not that long ago. And we've evolved so much from there, which is like, why don't we start diving through a little bit more of our own history to figure out, because it's weird. They had a plague back then. We're having a plague right now. There's correlations to a lot of stuff where it's like the blueprint's already there. We could just use the blueprint. It might be in a different way and more evolved, but the basic stuff of we're literally freaking out just like they did back then. And then it's like the same stuff's repeating itself.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of my lecturers, he actually specialises in Native American diseases, so plagues brought over by the Europeans when they colonised the Americas. And the amount of relevance that even that has to what we're going through just now is just mad. And I see everywhere people are comparing obviously the Spanish flu back in 1918 to this one, and some of it is completely and utterly relevant, and it's nice to see people connecting historical events to the modern day. But at the same time, people need to remember that science is a lot different now, society is a lot different now. Back then they didn't think about quarantining and stuff. They were like in a war obviously at that point, and so things were still a lot different, but the relevance is still there. And I do find it weird how, as much as we can progress in so many ways technologically and in society, we still have the same issues as people did centuries ago with plagues and similar. I mean, the mask wearing thing, they were doing that back then too. And yet it took us ages to think it might be a good idea here. So, yeah, you have to wonder if the blueprint should be better followed, maybe.
I think if like people talk about and complain about wearing masks, which it's a what take it or leave it type thing with me, but I'm like, if you made them look more badass, I feel like people would actually want to wear them. Like I saw one that was like, you ever seen the movie Predator or Alien?
Yeah, yeah.
It was the alien thing that comes out and hooks onto your face, but it was covering your mouth and the whole tail flipped around the back of your head. And I was like, that if you sold that, I would be more than happy to wear that. I would wear it when I slept.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I do like that. I like seeing all the different masks that keep appearing. Like, I swear they get weirder the further time goes on. And you see some and you're like, okay, right, different.
Or you just see some dude with a bandana and pray to God he's not robbing the bank that you're in.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. I've seen that and it's terrifying. Some of the way people are making masks is absolutely terrifying.
Now, if you like British history a little bit more, I do have to ask, how did Big Ben, how was that created?
Oh, I know nothing about Big Ben, I'll be totally honest.
The giant clock
Um,
tower?
yeah, yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's really, I know very little about Big Ben, I'm going to be honest, and I don't want to sit here and say facts which are wrong
Oh, no,
because
that's fine. I mean, that's what I do all day. But when it when it comes to like British history, for instance, do you ever go deep into the currency or maybe the royalties? Because like I thought the Queen was like this beloved thing, and then a few people had told me that I live over there that she's actually not. Like a lot of people do not like her.
yeah, I mean, the royal family as a whole and the Queen is very controversial here. There's a lot of people who adore it and think it's just this great thing, which is a great symbol for the country. But I think it's definitely turning into, I mean, I don't speak for every Scottish person. Some Scottish people love the monarchy, love the Queen, but a lot of us feel like she's definitely more of an English monarch than a Scottish one. And obviously there's the whole Scotland wanting independence kind of movement. So we definitely feel more like she's an English queen rather than, you know, Great Britain. But a lot of people absolutely adore her. But I honestly feel like generally she's actually loved by tourists and people from abroad more than people in this country, definitely. I mean, she's just a figurehead pretty much for us. I'm neutral on the monarchy. I don't have an opinion on them. Like I don't think they do any harm. But I also don't know if they quite have a place in modern society. I think that might be something which should be resigned to history books. So I'm just very neutral on the topic, but a lot of people are very, very opposed to it or very in love with it. It's very mixed.
Much like how we have like the Confederate flag, and then there's people that don't like the Confederate flag. Over in Scotland, there's a lot of people that don't like English or don't like the colonists, is what they call it. There was like a divide, which I don't understand. What's that discrepancy between them? Because I had some dude, his name's Gerard. He was on here, but he was talking about like he hates the colonists, and I'm like, is this like a thing? Like, is this just like mask or no mask? You hate people that don't wear masks? I don't understand what happened.
So do you mean the divide between like
Yeah,
Scotland and
like
England?
why is there just this tension between Scotland and England?
I mean, England were taking over Scotland and invading Scotland for a long, long, long time. They were always invading our country and whatever else, and eventually it was almost like we were sold to them, pretty much. I don't think people ever really got over that, but it's also just this, like, we're very competitive about everything over here, and
The
I mean, I
Celtic
couldn't care less.
Games. I
Yeah,
wore my green
yeah.
for this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, we're very competitive about pretty much anything over here. And I think the fact there's just a border there just gives us an excuse to kind of be rivals over something. I mean, I don't have like to stand on. My boyfriend is English, so I clearly do not care about that fact, but a lot of people do. And I definitely prefer being called Scottish than British. I would much rather someone said that my nationality was Scottish rather than British, but it doesn't bother me particularly. I'm not some, you know, anti-union really die-hard person. I just love Scotland a lot, basically.
The one thing I'm really
Um,
jealous of when it comes to like Scotland or people that are from there, people from Ireland or something, is how much they value the heritage, the fucking, I mean, pride and everything in their family and their values are something that a lot of people should be taking notes on. I mean, there is like a big, like, I'm the top dog type mentality, but it's fun banter. That's the whole point of the games and stuff. It's fun to challenge each other in that type of way. And it's like, people think of competitive as like this thing you got to cheat and do all these things to. I'm like, no, it's just about talking some trash and then playing and having fun and then getting a beer afterwards. Like, so many of my friends that come from Ireland have this whole entire like loyalty type thing instilled into them. And I'm like, I feel like a lot of people that have loyalty and like undying, like I would take a bullet for you, come from those genetics, because that's not something that is easily taught. That's something that's bred into you. Like, this is my family and this is what I care about.
yeah, definitely. I think that's where a lot of the Scotland-England divide comes from. It's just because it's basically defending your ancestors, pretty much. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from. But yeah, I mean, the UK is, we love sports. We love like being competitive and rivals within sports, and I think that carries all the way through to our actual genetics as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, on the whole, I don't think most people take it seriously. It's more of just like a fun rivalry to have because it's fun to be competitive. You do get some that take it way too far, but the majority, we like to have fun with it.
Do you ever dive down the road of Knights of the Templar?
No.
It's like
No.
the freaking it's like King Arthur and all those, the round table type talk, but it was like a thing. The Freemasons are what it is now, but it used to be this like huge giant like kind of secret society type thing. I'm like, that's what I would love to know, is that there's like a member of like every single country. Oh, this is actually the United Nations, I think is this. But like just a bunch of countries that come together and they just sit and they just do like fun, like weird creepy cult type stuff, like, hey, what's the problem going on over there? Well, this guy over, like, I would love to know that that was happening, that there's like this explicit team that valued the heritage, but it was like in a giant castle, like a Dracula size thing, where it's like you just walk in, there's just all these main figureheads that are really just chewing it out and just talking and having like this thing and having this meeting. I feel like, wouldn't that bridge a lot of problems? Like, we don't ever want to sit in the room with a person that thinks different than us. Then why don't we get in the room together and figure out why we think differently?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, yeah. Might take away a lot of wars and maybe have a degree more peace if people actually thought like that, I guess. Um, yeah, yeah. I think like rivalries build up really easily and they can just explode if they build up too far. But yeah, I mean,
I just
I
want
would
to
love
know
for there
where
not to be
stuff comes
conflict.
from. I just want to know where stuff comes from. I want to know, like, I don't understand the discrepancy of why we have this certain currency. What's the difference between pounds and regular cash? Why does everybody do something different in like kind of the same way, but just in a much more sophisticated way, depending on where you're from? Like, do you ever go into the idea of why we have the royalty all over the coins? Why do we establish that? Why do we have this certain type of currency? All this other stuff. Like, I heard that when the queen dies, they take a whole day, like 7 days or something off, and then they have to retract all the currency and put somebody else's face on it. I'm like, that seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot to do with identity in itself, like the identity of your country, and that's definitely something that I think most people would argue they take pride in their like national identity. Um, and obviously, the Queen is a huge figure of like Great Britain. So, I mean, I personally find things like that a bit extreme, but you know, all in the making of an identity of a nation, I guess. And I love seeing how the past is impacted on all. Every country obviously is different, it has its own identity and has all these different things that make up what their nation is. And I just love to see where all that came from because I mean, there's so much of it you could never even cover it. But it's really fascinating.
I would love to sit on like, I just observed not Leonardo da Vinci's time period, but like also how the colonies like over here started. I would love to see just the main, like, imagine if you could do like a time lapse, like you see those videos, but you get to literally watch it all happen and unfold right in front of you, like everything, America or UK being built, Scotland being built, all these things, and to see the rise and which way, why do they steer this certain direction? Everybody's born in a different spot and created in a different spot, and where they establish their country or establish their place of origin, it's built differently depending on the stuff that was involved over there. Scotland, all these types of things. Potatoes are a giant thing, and on another country like Romania or Bulgaria, depending on, they love potatoes, and they come here like, you guys don't eat potatoes? We're like, not really. It's pizza and other stuff like this, and it's weird to see how the growth has impacted. I like looking at them and like they value heritage more than we do. I think that's because we just became so advanced in our technology where we have everything that's getting shown to us all around the world and not really paying attention to the most important things that are in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot. Sorry, the potato thing completely threw me there because in my mind, just everyone loves
Potatoes.
potatoes, and how could you not love potatoes? How could you not want them
Because
most days?
garlic knots and pizza sticks have bigger pull over here than potato does, sadly. It's weird
Um,
because I worked with Romanian and Bulgarians, and they used to always come over here and be like, the American food is trash. And I'm like, what do you mean? You've eaten like 4 slices of pizza. And they're like, it's trash. The coffee tastes like shit too. I'm like, really? And then you try some of their stuff and you're like, oh, there's more time put into this. Ours is like if it was cloned.
okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think I'm particularly into any of the really traditionally Scottish foods. I'll be totally honest. So
Haggis?
I'm vegetarian. So
Ooh. I don't even know what haggis is. I thought that was vegetarian.
no, haggis is like intestine. No, what is it? No, I can't actually remember what it is. It's meat. It
It's
comes from
sheep?
animals.
Sheep?
It, I can't remember if it comes from sheep or not. I actually can't remember, but it is meat. I promise you. It's like black pudding. Like
That's
black
like,
pudding's blood. Like yeah, like it's like
I'm
intestines and stuff. That's where all that stuff comes from.
That's not what you want to hear from like a restaurant. I think it's meat. I'm pretty sure. 100% positive.
You just threw me there because I assume everyone knows what haggis
The
is.
vegan thing threw me. I didn't know what haggis was. I thought that was vegan.
No, it all comes from animals. So no.
Oh, man. Now I'm really thinking about potatoes.
I love potatoes. I mean,
They're all right. It depends. Do you put them in French fry form or do you prefer it in the actual potato?
ooh, I mean, it depends what you're in the mood of, to be honest. But I like traditional potatoes, but lots of butter. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned a secret when I was a kid. I'm not a big butter guy, but I remember my grandmom cut a baked potato in half, and then she put a piece of butter in there, and then she closed it, and then it just soaked the
Oh
whole thing.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
what sorcery is this?
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I love stuff like that. I mean, the vegetarian options could definitely be better across here. It's very much a meat eating country, but I manage. I do manage.
Just gotta plant a couple potatoes. I've tried to plant like tomato plants. Never works out at all. I forget to water them, or I water them too much, or a hurricane comes, and next thing you know, my plants are flying all over the place. And I'm like, this is too much work to grow food. And that's the issue that comes with the world, is that we become too comfortable to not know where our food comes from, and then we become too comfortable to not want to grow our own, and we waste stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the plant thing. I'm a crazy plant woman. I really am. I have like 15 in my bedroom alone, and they're all alive. They're still alive. So, but I definitely don't grow my own crops. I wish I could say I'm one of those people that, oh yeah, I grow my own produce, but I'm definitely not that. I do not have the time for that or the patience. I'll be totally honest. I admire people who do, but I'm just not that.
I admire people, to be honest with you, that do a lifestyle or diet like that where they cut everything out. Mostly, like I'll crack a joke on it or something, but I know, I eat chicken and I eat fish. I don't eat any red meats really, just because I try and eat clean. But I went to a chicken plant when I was a kid, and I saw what happened to all those chickens. And for a good 2 weeks, I was not eating chicken. But I have value for it now, where I know I usually try and make less, and then I eat that and make sure, like, wait like 30 minutes or so and see if I'm actually still hungry for more, rather than throwing it all out. Like, I think there's a giant problem that has been throughout our history of just wasting stuff. Like, back in the day,
Yeah.
we used to really care about, like, we got this rabbit and it's got to feed all five of us, so we have to, and it's got to feed us for 2 days. It's got to be something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then now it's like, I just ordered McDonald's. We got 8 slamming meals of breakfast. There you go. And then you toss it on the table, then it all gets thrown in the trash. Like, I'm just like, wow.
Yeah. I know, I know. Yeah, I mean, I have no issue with anything anyone eats. Like, I hate those people that are vegetarian or vegan or whatever that push on people. I cannot stand that. Like, eat what you want, but people need to definitely be, one, more cautious of where the food comes from, and two, not waste it, because that's an environmental problem. I mean, you have whatever diet preference you want, but please stop wasting so much food, and please recognize where your food comes from. It makes a huge difference. Like,
It leads into something else. Well, there's two things there. One, and when it comes to environmental, do you ever get worried about the weather climates that happen down where you're from, affecting a lot of the old architecture and the buildings, or they seem like they're built pretty strong, like they've been built to last? Because I always think like an earthquake, the first thing I'm thinking of, what are all the like historical stuff we have? Like, what about that? The important stuff, is that going to fall? What's going to happen?
yeah, I mean, I would argue most of it, if it's lasted this long, I'd be really surprised if it's going to go now. And the weather here is not like dreadful most of the time, Benny. It just rains a lot, that's all. So it's not that bad here. So I can't see anything really happening to it. And as long as there's so many charities and trusts which are so amazing at preserving all the heritage that we have. I think as long as they continue to be funded and they can keep taking care of all that stuff, I think it'll be absolutely fine. But yeah, I mean, that would worry me too. Like, the thought of anything, being ruined that's been in our country for that long just seems like an awful idea. And during all the lockdown stuff, obviously you couldn't go to any heritage sites, and the amount of heritage staff that have been made redundant, like the jobs working in the heritage sector are just diminishing so quickly, and it's really sad because we need people to take care of those buildings, otherwise they're just going to disappear. So yeah, I have that concern. Yeah, I really do.
Have you ever been to a place that, or culture, or any, I guess any location, it could be a heritage site if you want, where you really felt impacted when you went there?
um Impacted in what way?
Like touched, like, oh my God, like I mean, I don't have, and sadly in America, buildings aren't that really. There are certain ones like the Statue of Liberty, and there are certain symbols for us. But most of the places you go to, there's not really anything that means a whole lot that could be, easily torn down. I hold one that was closest in my town of Berlin. When I was a kid, I used to skate to the same video shop every single day and pick up like a little DVD, or like it's like a Blockbuster, but it was like a self-owned Blockbuster. And get candy, sit out on the curb, wait for my parents to leave, and then put in like Texas Chainsaw Massacre into the thing when I was like 10 years old. Um, not supposed to be watching it then, but that building got torn down and then turned into like a Rite Aid or a convenience store that's everywhere. And you're starting to notice every single building that meant something, a mom and pop shop or something, is being taken down and replaced. Like we have a Royal Farms gas station, world's best chicken, they say. Bullshit. Only because the last time I went there, like 4 years ago, it was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And they're like, sorry, we're out of chicken, so I can't make your chicken tender meal. Like, but it's world famous chicken. Like, that's what you guys are literally known for. And she was like, I don't feel like putting any more on. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I ended up just getting
The
French fries.
disappointment.
But you see, like, there's 8 of those gas stations all in like a 15-mile radius of each other. I'm like, that is way too excessive. Like, what about the old school stuff? And then it's like you start seeing that all be torn down, and especially how that video store meant so much to me. Have you come across anything like that you've went somewhere and been like, wow, like this is really like, this is amazing?
Um, I mean, pretty much every castle, historic house, or anything else I've ever been to, I feel that about. But there's a couple castles like that are nearby in particular that are so special to me. One is Glamis Castle, which is about 20-minute drive from where I stay, and it features on my page. I don't even know how many times, because it's like my favorite place ever. And it's just the most beautiful building I've ever seen. I grew up growing there. I want to get married there one day. I absolutely adore the place, and it is, as soon as I go there, I'm always just my breath is taken away from me every time I go. It's just the prettiest sight ever, and the thought of anything ever happening to that absolutely destroys me, because it's beautiful, and it contains so much history in it that anything happening to it would be devastating. And the other one would be Dunnottar Castle, which is also on my page. I'm giving myself like shout outs here. It's on like the edge of a cliff, and it just hangs over into the water, and it's just ruins now, but it's pretty well maintained ruins considering how much history is there. And it is the most dramatic castle I have ever seen, here or abroad. And it's right on the edge of a cliff. Like it's kind of a terrifying
Like series
sight
of
to think.
unfortunate events type.
Yeah. So I'd probably say those two are probably my favorite things. Then there's loads of buildings just in my city that are really nice and have things in them, the same as what you said, that I've grown up going to and that they're special to me. But yeah, I would have to say those two places in particular. They're really special to me.
I would never want to live on a cliff. I think the only good part is it's got an amazing view, but you have no backyard.
No, I don't think I could. I don't really like water that much, so it would not be my ideal, I'll be honest.
Well, you would hate where I live. I'm in a beach town.
Oh, right, okay. I mean, I can, it's pretty, it's nice to look at, and I like going in it a little bit. Just don't put me in the deep end of anywhere, and I'm fine.
I was okay with going into the water, but then I saw the movie Meg, and I'm like, I get it. I don't need that anxiety in my life, you know? There's just that moment where you think a giant prehistoric shark's going to eat you. And I'm like, you know what? It's probably not going to happen, but I did jet skis for so long that I had been face to face with a hammerhead before. So I'm like, I'm
Oh,
good. Good.
yeah. I just don't like how unknown the water is. I mean, we barely know anything about most of the oceans which cover the earth. That's terrifying. And then half of it's in complete and utter darkness. I just think that's so scary.
What's weird is that time affects differently down there since they don't see sunlight. They found a dino fish that they thought been extinct for like 60 million years down there.
See, that's insane, and that's really cool, but that's terrifying. I'm sorry. That really is.
You want to talk about building a castle? I just want to find Atlantis. I believe that if time goes slower down there, maybe there is a race of mer people. No,
It's an interesting thought.
I don't really believe that.
It's possible. That's what I mean. We don't know though. That could be possible. That's how
Oh,
scary that is.
damn it! The conspiracy theorists listening are going to start something up again.
Yeah, they are. They really are.
If I had to give you like maybe the opportunity to build a castle, where would you build it? Would you build it on a cliff or would you build it in the middle of the woods?
Ooh.
I don't care
I
about the
could,
view. I'm not building it on a cliff.
I mean, if I could build it anywhere, it would honestly be on the top of a hill somewhere because that's the safest place to have a castle because you can see anybody coming for you. So I'd have to stay on top of a hill somewhere,
I like
honestly.
your war thinking. I like it.
Yeah. Plus, you'd get the nice view then, and you aren't going to get eaten by a shark too, which would be nice.
I would build it on an island. Like I would try and have like that something that was separated, or you had to take like one bridge to get over to that part of the thing. So then I could only worry about one way they would come in unless they had boats.
Yeah, okay, that's true. But then also at the same time, you've only got the one way out of there.
I don't want to leave my castle. I would just build it with
Okay,
everything
fair.
I need. It's like with people that build a moat. I get it now. You have one entrance, and then you just fill that moat with a bunch of stuff. I would fill mine with like crocodiles and stuff. I
Fair
mean,
enough.
is you don't want to fill it with sharks. That would be terrible. Crocodiles can go on land half the time, so you just do that.
Okay, yeah, true.
And no haggis.
No haggis. No, I'm still intrigued as to what you thought haggis was because it's sheep.
Thought it
So
was like a stew.
no, it's sheep mixed with it's got like oatmeal and onions and other stuff in it.
I'm thinking like a mix of like sauerkraut with something else. Like I'm picturing what sauerkraut looks like, but then under it's like chili or something stewish.
I'm not sure what
Wagyu.
you.
I don't know what that is. It's a fun word. Toss that one in there.
Yeah, it's a weird food. It's a weird food.
Well, I think I've wasted enough of your time. I appreciate you for doing the podcast, Victoria. Is there anything you want to promote, such as your Instagram page?
Yeah, I run History by Victoria, which is a page where I post my photography stuff and I write about the history of the places below it. So yeah, that's a hobby of mine.
Because pictures may say 1,000 words, but also letting people know what the picture is of, you're also saying more than 1,000 words.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. And don't stalk the page like I did. I didn't really stalk it. I was just looking at photos and they were
I'm
cool.
honored. Okay.
I like architecture. I played Minecraft. I got my inspiration in there.